Ever heard that one about the Nobel Prize-winning physicist and the bird?
Can't say that I have. Sounds interesting, though.
It's not a joke, really, but it kind of sums up this big idea way of learning we're looking at today.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
So we're using this Chinese text about, well, teaching design.
Right.
To figure out how focusing on the core concepts can totally change how we learn, you know?
Yeah, it makes sense.
Ready to unlock some, next level understanding?
Always up for that. So, what's this about a physicist and a bird?
Okay, so get this. Richard Feynman, brilliant physicist, right? He's out walking with his dad as a kid.
Yeah.
And he sees a bird. Like any kid would. He asks, what kind of bird is that?
I'd probably just Google it these days.
Right. But Feynman's dad, he doesn't just give him the name.
Ooh, how so?
Instead of just an answer, he uses it to start a whole bigger conversation.
Interesting, like what?
He starts talking about, observation, you know?
Okay.
Asking questions, even making guesses about what the bird's doing, even if the guesses are wrong.
So it becomes a learning moment.
Exactly. And get this, it wasn't even really about that specific bird. It was about getting the bigger picture, like how ecosystems work, how everything's connected.
It's like he was giving young Feynman a mental blueprint,
Yeah.
A big idea.
Exactly. And that he could use to understand everything about birds, about nature, about science.
Instead of just, oh, that's a robin, it's like, well, robins are a part of this whole system.
And that's what big idea teaching is all about, giving you those big concepts, those mental blueprints, so you're not memorizing random facts, you know?
It's about building a framework for understanding. I like it.
So instead of the name of the bird, you're understanding its place in the whole ecosystem. Makes sense.
Perfectly. It's moving away from just memorizing and towards knowledge you can actually use.
And that's what resonates with our listeners. They want depth without useless trivia.
For sure. But we should probably be clear on what we mean by big ideas, though, right?
Oh, absolutely. It's not just a buzzword, it's a powerful idea. Our source lays out some clear characteristics that might help.
Yeah, good point. It stresses that big ideas are central to a subject. Like the base of a house, everything else is built on them.
Yeah, and they're the knowledge that you remember way after you forget the little details. They stick with you.
And here's a big one. They're all connected. Think of it like a web. Each big idea is linked to others, making this huge tapestry of understanding.
And because they're connected, they're transferable. You're not just learning something in isolation.
Exactly. You can take those big ideas and use them in new situations, new problems, even outside of the subject.
It's not about just passing a test. It's about having knowledge that matters. Knowledge that you can use in the real world. Pretty powerful stuff.
It really is. And it reminds me of that example from our source about cells.
You mean organisms are made of cells and have a life cycle?
Yes. That one big idea can explain so much. How a caterpillar turns into a butterfly, how ecosystems work, even the effects of DDT. Amazing, right?
You're seeing the world in a whole new way. And that's the cool thing about big ideas. They give you that lens, that framework for making those connections.
Exactly. And there was another great example from physics this time. Remember how it talks about changing how we think about Newton's third law?
To focus on how forces always act on different objects.
Yes. It seems like a small change, but it changes how you see the whole concept.
And it helps people actually use that concept in the real world. It's not just theory anymore, it's practical. Okay, so we've got this idea of big ideas, these foundational concepts that are central, enduring, networked, and transferable. But for those who want to know the practical applications, the why does this matter?
Right, of course. Well, I mean, it makes sense if you think about it. It's easy to talk about, but putting it into practice.
Right. There are always challenges when you're trying to actually implement something new, especially in education. What kind of hurdles are we talking about?
Well, for one, it's a whole different way of thinking. For teachers and students, really, we're used to teaching being about giving information.
Yeah, that's the traditional model.
But with big ideas, teachers are more like guides, helping students discover and connect things on their own.
Instead of just lecturing at them.
Yeah, exactly. And that's not always easy for teachers who are used to the old way. They have to know their stuff so well that they can find those big ideas and build their lessons around them, you know?
So it's more than just knowing the facts. It's about seeing the bigger picture, how it all connects.
Right, exactly. And then there's the question of, well, how do you even grade this stuff? A multiple choice test doesn't really show if someone gets those big ideas.
You're trying to measure something deeper than just memorization.
And that's where it gets interesting. We need to find ways to test knowledge that are, more true to life.
So we can see how students would use these ideas in the real world.
Exactly.
Instead of just memorizing for a test, maybe they could, I don't know, work on projects or give presentations.
Exactly. Something that shows they understand those big ideas and how they connect to, real life.
It's about connecting what they learn in class with the real world. So even though there are challenges, sounds like the benefits of big idea teaching make it worth it.
For sure. And it's not just about grades, right? It's about building critical thinking skills, problem solving, being able to adapt things that are crucial in this crazy world.
It's about setting students up for success in life, not just in school. But let's get to the fun part. How does this actually work in different subjects?
Let's do it. Our source had some really interesting examples, like take math. Instead of just memorizing times tables or formulas, what if students learned about the big idea of, equivalence?
So instead of fractions and decimals and percentages being these separate scary things,
But start to see how it's all just different ways of showing the same value.
like 12.5, 50%, they all mean the same amount.
Exactly. Or the source also mentioned the big idea of functions, which can be really abstract.
Especially if you just throw equations and graphs at them without any real-world connection. It all seems meaningless.
Totally. But what if you start with stuff that kids get, like patterns in nature, or how much money they make selling lemonade?
Start simple and then build from there.
Yes. Make it feel like a natural progression, not like throwing them in the deep end. And our source had this great point about how big ideas can change how we teach language arts too.
Oh, I love that. Instead of just pointing out metaphors and similes, it's about why an author used them. Like, what were they going for?
Exactly. Was it to inform you, persuade you, entertain you? Maybe all three. Figuring that out, that's a big idea in itself, and you can apply that to any book.
Yeah.
And speaking of digging deeper, there's the big idea of perspective, which is huge, not just in books, but in life too.
It's like trying to see things from someone else's point of view.
It's understanding that there are many ways to see the same thing, the same story, and that's so important, not just in school, but in the real world.
It helps you understand different points of view, question what you think you know, and form your own opinions.
And that's what big idea teaching is all about, helping you to think for yourself and really understand the world around you.
So we've talked about what big idea teaching is, why it matters, and we've seen how it can change how we approach different subjects. But now for the fun part. I want to kind of put the ball in your court for a sec.
Oh, okay. I like it, making me think.
Imagine, right, you're designing a lesson or even a whole course based around one single big idea. What would it be? And how would it change how we learn?
Wow, that's a really interesting question to think about. It makes you think about the stuff that really shaped how you see things. Like, what if I had learned that stuff through a big idea lens way back when?
Right. Maybe it's something from your own area, your expertise, or maybe something that, I don't know, connects different things, like the power of storytelling, or how systems work, like from the human body to, I don't know, the entire economy.
Exactly. And then how would you even teach it? What would make those big ideas really click,
It's like your chance to reinvent education. How would you make it fun? How would you know if someone really understood?
You got to spark those aha moments, make them think for themselves, and not just learn stuff, but actually use it, to make a difference.
So there you have it, our deep dive into big idea teaching. We talked about what it is, why it matters, and how it can change how we see different subjects.
We even talked about some of the challenges of actually doing it.
But the big takeaway, we wanted to give you, our awesome listeners, a chance to see how this way of thinking can totally change how you learn.
It's about finding those connections that unlock real knowledge.
What are the big ideas that get you fired up? What connections are you seeing in your own world? Keep those questions coming.
Never stop exploring.
And that's a wrap. Until next time, keep those brains buzzing.